Press record. So thank you all for joining today's office hour. Exciting times. We have a conversation around Integration Hub, general best practice information, talk about anything related to that. We have our guest speaker, Josh, who's going to be the subject matter expert. For all of those who are new to the format and those who are used to it, my name is Charles Rayburn. I'm the assigned customer success advocate for the majority of you customers that are there. If not, definitely glad to be hosting you guys for this office hour. And for the first 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to talk about and let Josh talk about the best practice applications of Integration Hub. So he'll kind of level set, walk through that topic nature. And then for the remaining 40 minutes, we'll actually open up the door for all sorts of questions and comments that you guys may have for Josh and others on the line. And that way, that'll give you guys a good chance to talk back and forth around what are some of the key areas that you guys may be focusing on. If there aren't any questions going on, don't be shy. Feel free to raise your hand and just say, hey, I got a question randomly about the topic, and we'll ask it and address it accordingly. So without further ado, Josh, you can go ahead, introduce yourself, and then share your screen with your PowerPoint.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, I'm Josh Nereus. I'm a principal product manager here in the platform team at ServiceNow. My focus is integrations and authentication, includes Integration Hub. So very excited to be working on that and talking to you about that today. Just a little bit about me. I've been at ServiceNow for almost 7 years. And before that, I was a customer for a couple of years and spent the bulk of my time in the first 4 or 5 years here at the company sort of working with our customers and building out their integrations. So I spent some time in the field, and then I moved into our developer program, did some work with our developer advocacy team. So really I've been focused on sort of the customer side for the majority of my time with ServiceNow. And now I have the privilege of being on the product side and sort of taking that background, that feedback, and you know, turning it into real product and things that can sort of help solve the problems that we know that our customers have. And then with me presenting today will be Michael Fortson. He's from our outbound team. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But you know, we just wanted to kind of take you through an Integration Hub overview first, and really just focused on kind of what it is, how we think about it, how it sits next to Flow Designer, which is another key capability of the platform. Really to just set context for, you know, what is Integration Hub and what makes that thing up. And so then we'll dive into the questions and we can talk more about the practical applications as necessary. So Michael, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I joined ServiceNow about 3 years ago as part of an acquisition, the team that became the virtual agent product within ServiceNow. Since then, I've helped launch the mobile application, and now I've spent the last several months on platform enablement, and most recently helping Josh and his team with the outbound product management aspect so that they can focus on really building the next generation of Flow Designer and Integration Hub. So with that, I will go ahead and get into the presentation. So this is going to contain forward-looking statements, things that we expect to be doing, but there's no guarantee. So every enterprise has somewhere between a few to several strategic platforms, and these represent systems of record for various departments within the company. And without digital workflows, there's really no way to get this data cohesively. These platforms are siloed. And so you have unstructured processes, collaboration is difficult, and you're often swivel chairing from one system to another to re-enter data. And finally, you can't measure it, and it's hard to optimize as well. So the Now platform has created digital workflows with Flow Designer and Integration Hub, and we allow for business logic and integration workflows across all of these disparate platforms. We provide a killer UX across native mobile, web, and chat with intelligence built in. So you can track key performance indexes, suggesting which areas you should improve, and we make it easy to scale development, increasing speed and allowing for governance across the board. In order to scale, IT needs to capture the subject matter expertise into reusable, codeless components. So we give the process analyst a guided natural language experience with authoring the business process. And the business can update policy without having to rewrite the processes. And the interesting thing here is this is not just for low-code developers. These tools also enable the pro coder to spend less time on plumbing and more time building out important business logic. Customers need a tool with common protocols, common features, common spokes, all based on a common platform. And that's what we provide with the Now platform and Flow Designer and Integration Hub. And the key facets of Flow Designer and Integration Hub are to enable end user productivity for ITSM and HR, infrastructure automation for operations and SecOps, and business automation for customers and partners. So this is a bit of the history of Flow Designer and Integration Hub. Kingston was the first release, and here we provided natural language codeless flows, basic web services, discoverability, and reusable actions. So you create an action once and you can reuse it throughout the platform. And scripts became scriptless. We enabled ITSM, CSM, benchmark, visual task boards, connect, and notifications. All of these came to the table with Kingston. And we supported HipChat, Slack, Microsoft Teams, and ServiceNow to ServiceNow e-bonding. Approvals were reimagined. We supported ServiceNow data manipulation and notifications. And operational troubleshooting was also reimagined. In London, we stepped it up, stages and reimagined service catalog. We added subflows and supporting inputs and outputs. There's metric-based triggers for flows. And we provided APIs to asynchronously call flows and operations. We also added mid-server support. On the feature side, we added support for PowerShell and JavaScript on the mid-server, and we support codeless attachments for REST. And finally, we added spokes for Microsoft Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. Madrid added advanced workflows with functions such as for each logic and tasks running in parallel. We also added attachment actions, timers, and two-way encrypted passwords. We added action APIs where you could build integrations once and run them anywhere. We added leverage for existing investments in workflow, decision management, and provided really the foundation for bidirectional integrations. And we support SOAP. Orlando was a huge release for Flow Designer and Integration Hub. We tripled our investment, and it shows. We added codeless bidirectional integrations, including no-code transformations. These are like Excel macros where the workflow author can click on a data pill and choose to manipulate the value with no code. For example, you get date to string, where the user can specify the format, string to date, simple math operations, find a value within a string and return its position. You can uppercase a value, lowercase a value, all sorts of manipulations. And the outcome of that is to provide the ability to transform data in a flow for common patterns without resorting to script. We also added dynamic subflows for runtime decisions and process executions, like an extension point within a workflow, the ability to call on a flow or subflow using runtime parameters. For example, you can escalate a case where whatever support tier is an arbitrary runtime value of gold or silver or bronze, and the correct tier for the contract level subflow is called dynamically at runtime. We also enabled no-code service level management workflows. We've migrated IT service management service level management from our legacy workflow product to Flow Designer. For example, when 50% of an SLA is passed, you can send a reminder to the assignee. When 90% of the SLA is passed, you can send a reminder to the assignee and their manager about the upcoming SLA breach. And the outcome for that is simplifying authoring of SLA workflows with no-code Flow Designer. And we improved bidirectional integrations with schema introspection. Now, we introduced schema inspection in New York and improved it in Orlando. In this context, introspection means that our integrations learn the third-party schema on the fly, even with customizations. And if we get a chance to do a Jira demo, I would love to show you that. We normalize the data in Flow Designer for a simple and intuitive workflow, authoring the experience. For Paris, just a peek at the future, Integration Hub is getting a connection management dashboard. This is a single place where you can look at all of the integrations that you've created on this instance. It also allows you to configure multiple accounts for any connection type. For example, if I have multiple Slack instances, Slack accounts, I can actually configure them all right here. And for Flow Designer, we've got Run with Role, which if you have experience with Flow Designer, usually you would have two choices. You can run it as the user invoking the flow, or you can run it as a system. And here we give you the ability to specify the exact role that runs this flow. We support decision table action. So as part of your flow logic, you can use a decision table. We've improved the catalog support. And Josh, anything else we should cover really on this?
I think this is a good overview. And really, I think the main highlights here are just in consumerization and simplifying that configuration experience. That's something we're spending a lot of time really making it easier to get up and running quickly.
So for the some interesting facts about Orlando, Paris, and Quebec. For Orlando, we had 40 spokes released. For Paris, it's going to be 70. And by the end of the year, we're expecting 100 spokes to be on the market. And this is just representing the scale of the investment that we've been making. A quick peek at the spokes that we've got so far. These are all released. And here's a sneak peek at what's coming. We've got a bunch under development, including a lot for SAP, Cisco, many more Azure spokes coming down the path. And here you can see what's coming up for Q2, Q3, and Q4. Now these are all our expectations. Any of those could change, but this is what we're planning on. And as far as performance goes, for New York, we hit hundreds of flows per second. We're pushing the speed of scripting when reporting is off, and we're over 7 times the speed of London. You can do up to 100,000 flows in about 5 minutes. And that wraps up the presentation for Flow Designer and Integration Hub. Do you guys, would you guys like to see a demo of the Jira spoke? I think we have some time for that.
I will say yes. If no one else will say yes, I will say yes. This is Charles. I would love to see that, actually.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Let me fire that up.
I think one of the things that you'll see as Michael gets into the demo is we've put a lot of investment from Kingston through Paris and sort of the foundational capabilities, the core components necessary to build these spokes. And you'll see that pay off and come to fruition in the spokes themselves. And so all the things that we ship or deliver as part of spokes are built on the Integration Hub framework. That framework is also available to our customers. And so if you think about it, we're shipping, you know, this library of pre-built capabilities, but we're also shipping the factory that was used to create that library. And so that's kind of one of the reasons we like to spend some time talking about, you know, what are those incremental steps we've taken? What are the core capabilities we've built in? Because not only does that enable the kinds of spokes we can ship to you, but also the things you can build for yourselves.
Can you see 2 browser screens without anything in the way, or is there stuff in the way?
Looks good.
Yep, looks good.
All right, so on the left, we have a ServiceNow instance. On the right, we have Jira open. And I'm going to go ahead and start from the very beginning on the ServiceNow side. So what we want is we want to create a bidirectional connection between incidents on the ServiceNow instance and incidents, in this case, called issues on Jira. So we're going to start off with Flow Designer. We'll open that up. And let's start from scratch with a new flow. We'll call this Monday Demo. So the first thing we want to do is add a trigger. And this is what will make this flow kick off. And the trigger we want is anytime an incident is created. So I'm going to look for created, and I'm going to tell it to look at the incident table. Once I activate this flow, anytime an incident's created, this is going to run. So what do we want it to do? We actually want it to go over to Jira and create an issue. So we'll look at the Jira spoke. We'll say create issue. And we want it to match the one that was just created on ServiceNow. Now here's where we get into a little bit of a cool feature, the introspection feature that I mentioned. We don't know what the projects are over on Jira. And if I look, there's actually several of them. So we've gone in the background and actually requested from Jira, hey, what are the projects? And here's all of them. So we're going to select the test one. What's the issue type? We're going to want a bug. Again, this is using introspection. You can make these things whatever you want to call them on the Jira side, so we let you see the right ones and pick them this way. The summary is the title. So we want to pull out our incident record. This is what started the whole process. We want to pull over our short description to match up with the incident issue type. So let's see, short description, we'll drag that here. And we want the long description to match the long description from our instance. So let me find that here. There is a description. All right, so this is all you need to create an incident in Jira from what happened on ServiceNow. But this is really only half the problem. We want to make this bidirectional, so we need to bond this new issue recreated back with the one that was made on ServiceNow. So I'll go ahead and update this incident. We have a special field which lets us do this. So the record that we want to update is the one that started the whole thing off, so I'll drag that over. And then the field we want to update is the correlation ID. This is the glue that ties these two together. And the value that we want to put into there is this one. Whenever I create an incident in Jira, it gives me back the issue that created. So I'm going to take the issue ID and bind it right here to the correlation ID. And that is it. We have just created a bidirectional incident tracking system for Jira. There's another piece which I'll show you next, but this will get it created. And now we can test this out. Next thing is to activate it. And now anytime we create an incident, this flow is going to be called and then it will run. Over on the right, I'd have the list of incidents, the current list of incidents in Jira. So next up, we need to create an incident so we can try this out. So let's go ahead and look at incidents. Make sure I find the right one. And we'll create a new one. We'll call this as the current logged in user. I've named it Ashley Smith. And we'll call this Monday incident. Description ServiceNow. Let's go ahead and submit this. Now going back to Flow Designer, I've got a button here for executions, and I can click on that and see that there is a queued execution. And we'll just refresh this until it completes, and it's complete. We'll take a look at this execution to see what it did. So incident triggered this. We created an issue. That one's been completed. And we updated our record. That one's also been completed. So now if I go over to Jira and refresh this list, there's our Monday incident. And along with the description from ServiceNow. There's another step where we can actually make an update over here and bring it back. Would you guys like to see that as well?
Let's do it.
There's a yes coming from a couple of people nodding heads.
Yes.
I say yes.
All right, so let me go back to the beginning here. I'm going to need to disable a subflow that I had previously done for this. If I can find it.
And while Michael's disabling that subflow, I think just a couple things to highlight. You know, when he was creating that flow from scratch, this concept of introspection, our ability to go and dynamically get that information from third-party systems is something that's really allowed us to change the game in terms of how simple it is to create these integrations. Historically, you worry about what happens when the other system got customized. How do I make those customizations, show up in my ServiceNow system, and how do I manage that over time? And introspection really lets us just seamlessly handle that. It's just automatic. It's part of using or setting up the integration, and it's all there. And the other thing is the operations view, the execution view that Michael showed, where you can go and you can see all the things that executed. Really makes it easy to go and troubleshoot these things. You know, historically, before Integration Hub, you may have been going and looking at system logs, downloading log files off of the server, and that tends to be rather challenging. And so we've been able to surface that all in one place in the context of what it was that actually made the integration happen to begin with. And it just makes it easy to see and troubleshoot as you manage your integrations.
So something I wanted to show you here is this subflow called process Jira webhooks. This comes as part of the spoke. You don't have to create it from scratch. What you're meant to do is open that up and duplicate it. So I'll go ahead and do that. This takes a minute. I've got a pretty slow instance here. It's just a demo instance that I've had running for several months. And it's not nearly the horsepower that you see on a production instance. So bear with me whenever I do this. This is how you know it's a live demo, because we didn't shorten this process.
And while that instance is doing its thing, are there any questions, comments, otherwise about what we've covered so far from the room?
All right, so now that I've got this subflow open, I am going to go up to the little hamburger menu and copy it. And we'll call this Monday webhook demo. All right, system, I know it's Monday, but let's get moving here.
It's an accurate representation of the state of my brain this morning.
That's right.
Either that or it's sitting on that nice, beautiful island.
I know, right?
And that's not my island, the one that was in the background on the other screen, but it's not too dissimilar. I'm going to refresh this screen. It's particularly pokey this morning. And usually I will wake it up before we get into the demo, but I didn't have time for that. Come on, fella.
So a few other things to highlight while Michael's working on that is, as we build spokes, and we'll take a minute to highlight some of the spokes that are out there and are coming. But as we build those out, we start with the outbound component. So that is, how does ServiceNow talk to whatever the other system is? And that includes things like, how do we introspect? How do we retrieve the details of that other system? So that allows us to then do things like push data into Jira. More and more systems now support this concept of webhooks, and really webhook is a way for a third party to send us some event, some signal that something happened on their side. And this makes it easier for us to retrieve those updates without having to go and, imagine having to check Jira every 10 minutes. Hey, do you have any updates? Do you have any updates? The webhook allows Jira to tell us, hey, here's your update. And so it reduces the system resources. We can minimize the amount of traffic back and forth between the systems. And so to help simplify that setup, what we do is with each spoke that supports webhooks, we will introduce an inbound API to accept those webhooks. And then we also will ship a series of demo flows or subflows that are able to then process those events. So it makes it very easy for you to say, hey, when an issue is updated in Jira, I can bring my own business logic, because we know that we can't ship one standard thing that works for everyone. And so we'll provide you with an example flow, sort of a blueprint for what should you do or how should you set up your own business logic. And so that's our current strategy when it comes to inbound components and spokes, and that allows us to create these bidirectional relationships with other systems. And you'll notice that so far, we haven't looked at a single piece of code. And that's by design. We want to stay away from code as much as possible. While we do use some code inside the spokes, the goal is saying that, hey, as a developer or admin consuming or using the spoke, let's make code as little part of that equation as possible. Focus on the business logic, focus on the process, rather than focusing on dealing with response codes from APIs. So just shift and focus on the things that matter.
That's a very good point, Josh. I'm glad you raised that. What I liked about the presentation so far and then kind of the demonstration is that there is no code And that the mere fact that you talked about focusing on the process, that's key. That's what we talk about heavily as your customer success advocate. That's what we talk about in the Customer Success Center. For all you customers out there, the key really is making sure that you get your processes down to the most efficient state to then start mapping them into the integration hub. So definitely kind of think of that moving forward. Oh, it looks like it's popped back up, right, Mike?
Finally, yes. I probably should have restarted my browser and the instance before running this, just because it does get abused quite a bit. So this is a copy of our process webhooks demo. And all it does so far is receive an issue that was updated and log it. So we want to do something else with this. And what we want to do is update our record. And Josh, stop me if I'm missing a step. It's been a few days.
Yeah, no, I think you're all good. And while Michael's going through this, and keeping in mind the record we're updating, this is Jira coming and saying, hey, here's an update. And so now it's our job to say, hey, based on what happened in Jira, which record do we want to update in ServiceNow? And so that's kind of the next part that Michael's configuring here. And we can do that by looking at the issue object. So you'll notice within Flow Designer over on the right-hand side, there's a data panel. That data panel always gives us access to sort of the context of what's going on. In this case, they're the inputs that were sent to us by Jira. And so we can actually drill into that issue type and see which issue ID this particular webhook event is coming from.
You know, I skipped the lookup record, so let me do that. While we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and restart this browser to see if I can get into a better flow. So as soon as I get a chance to save this, I'm going to save it. Oh, maybe it's responsive now. Let's see. All right, so we get a flow, we get an issue from Jira. We log it. The next thing I want to do is actually find the matching incident on the ServiceNow incident. So we'll say lookup record. And I assure you, this is a fraction of the speed that it should be going. My apologies for that.
Yes, we do apologize for the law of live demos in action. What this does give us a good opportunity, though, is to add lots of commentary as we go through the creation of the flow. And something that I'll call attention to here is, every time Michael clicks on that select to add an action, this brings up our action picker. The action picker is our entry point into exploring what are all of the things that I can do. And this can range from I want to create records in ServiceNow to the thing that we did a minute ago, which was send something off to Jira. And you'll notice that they're all next to each other. So we can seamlessly go in and out of integration versus on platform, and the experience is the same. And that's something that we think is really a key differentiator in terms of how we think about integrations is it's all just part of automating a process. And so you can start a process that's all on platform, maybe there's no integration at all. And then when appropriate, you can choose to start using those integrations seamlessly as part of that overall flow.
So here's where we're doing the lookup of the record. We want to match the correlation ID, which we added in the previous flow. And we want to make sure that it matches the issue ID that is being sent over by Jira. So we'll just drag this over. And again, we haven't typed any code so far. So this will grab the incident that we're going to want to update. And the next step after this is going to be to update the description to match the one that was changed on Jira. All right. So we'll add an action here. Action is going to be to update the record that we just looked up. I suppose the result of this is the process will be seared in everybody's memory because we're getting a long time to look at it.
It's certainly being seared in mine.
Monday morning demos. So what do we want to update? We want to update the one that we just looked up. So here's the process to look up the record. I'll go ahead and grab that, bring it over. We'll wait for that to update. And what do we want to do with it? Are we live yet? So we're going to want to update the description. And then we're going to want that work to match the description that we just got from Jira. So we'll drag that value over. All right, and we're done. I'll go ahead and save this. And publish it. So now when I do this, the webhook is going to start listening for Jira to call back over and say, hey, I've got an update for you. I'll wait until this shows a state of published before I do this. All right, so the state is published. So let's go ahead and take a look over in Jira again. Here is the incident that we just created, and here's the description that we entered from ServiceNow. We want to update the description from Jira. So I've saved that. And now I want to go over here and actually look at the executions. Did I miss a step? Not seeing it yet. Josh, I may have an instance that's gotten all tied in knots.
Yeah, we may want to just move beyond the inbound demo at this point. We'll investigate what's going on with this one. One of the risks of the work that Michael and I do is we're often working on early builds. And so we will investigate this and see what's going on.
No worries. Looks like Daniel, you have a question?
Yeah, not directly related to the Jira demo, but I was curious. One of the features I missed from the traditional workflows is the parallel flow launcher. Is that in the roadmap at any point in the future?
So yeah, the parallel flow launcher is something that we haven't directly replicated in the traditional sense. There is a feature called do the following in parallel, which will allow you to kick off a variety of processes in a parallel fashion. It doesn't have some of the capabilities of the parallel flow launcher, like the concurrency controls, etc. So I guess the short answer is you may be able to do some of the things that were provided by the parallel flow launcher. It depends on your use case. So would be happy to talk more about that or dig in deeper.
Okay, thank you.
So what we would have seen and should have seen is that you would have the log over here of the webhook coming back, looking at that incident and updating it with the description that we just got here. And typically that's what happens during these demos, but I have clearly got an instance that's tied in nuts, which needs some cleanup. So apologies for that. And thanks for your patience as we went through it. With that, that's the end of the demo. Thank you. And Josh, back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I know we wanted to make sure we spent some time, reserving time for questions, Q&A, et cetera. And I'm also happy to use it as an opportunity for impromptu demos as well. So I can pull up a demo instance if there are particular areas of interest or that folks are, want to see. I can dive into what some of those look like.
Great. So anyone on the line who would like to ask Josh and Mike a good question around Integration Hub? If not, a good portion of maybe an additional demo of another spoke or something like that.
On a different instance.
Yeah, there we go.
I had a question. Since we are an orchestration user, is there a migration path from orchestration to Integration Hub?
Oh, that's my bailiwick. Yes, there is. So would you like to see a short presentation on that, on migrating that license?
Sure.
And I guess just clarifying the question, is the question about a technical migration path of the actual workflows or more of a, how do I move to Integration Hub licensing? I want to make sure we're...
For us, I guess there'd probably be a little bit of both, probably more on the technical side for me. It would be like, yeah, how do we get our workflows that were written for orchestration moved to
let me bring up one slide that covers that, but our general guidance on that is you shouldn't focus too much on migrating workflows as much as investing in new functionality in Flow Designer and Integration Hub. And you can actually call a workflow directly from Flow Designer. Let me bring up that slide.
Yeah, due to the vast differences in the underlying process engines, there's not a technical, there's no button that says, hey, move this workflow into a flow. But as Michael will show you in a moment, we do have that seamless ability to call into those workflows because we know a lot of these flows are business critical. They're running code that you maybe don't want to touch. And so we've made it easy to make that call from Flow Designer into a legacy workflow engine and still get all of the outputs.
What's cool is you can have a flow that feeds into the workflow, passing data, and then the workflow can actually pass data back out for the next step in the Flow Designer flow. It's a really slick feature and makes it really seamless to keep your existing investment in orchestration and move forward with the much simpler flows in Flow Designer. Now, have you guys talked about migrating your license yet?
Not yet. We're only just getting started into Integration Hub.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit about why you would want to migrate. This session is being recorded, so I'll let you review that at your leisure. It's really about speed, productivity, and the many, many more integrations compared to orchestration, as well as much greater ease of use and that seamless integration that we mentioned. And faster time to value is really just the start of that. This is what we showed about how to use both together. Almost 70 spokes already. We're expecting over 1,000 actions by June, which is just now. Again, this many spokes by package. These are grouped by different logical groupings. The first one is about the starter package, which is about building your own work effectively. The standard packages for developer efficiency. So the sort of common things like Jira, which I just showed you, DevOps boards, Ansible, Docker, GitHub, all of those integrations. High value IT comes in professional. And this is the first one that includes orchestration entitlement. So if you want to carry your orchestration investments forward, you're looking at professional or enterprise. And if you just look at the number of features and spokes that are included with those, along with the number of transactions, they represent tremendous value. So they're a really good investment. Then finally, again, this is the spoke roadmap. For you guys, this diagram is going to be going along the top path, which is you do want to continue using orchestration. So you'll need to get pro or higher. That gives you the orchestration entitlement, 3 to 6 million transactions, which is huge. Starter package doesn't come for free, but it does come along with either professional or enterprise. Any questions around the licensing there? And some common questions around how this works. How do we define a transaction? It's an outbound connection only. Anything that originates from or was created as part of an action. Remote tables is included in that transaction count. And if you're doing pagination where you're pulling in large amounts of data, it's 1 transaction per request per page. The response size doesn't matter. So if you make an outbound request and you get back a book of stuff, it's still just 1 transaction. And what's going on with orchestration? Well, we've worked to migrate orchestration capabilities over to Integration Hub with each release, starting with Kingston. We prioritize the most heavily used features. It'll continue to function, and customers with orchestration entitlement can continue using it, as we've shown. However, there will not be any new features or activity paths for orchestration. We recommend, again, that you keep your existing workflow, your orchestration workflows, and new development should happen in Flow Designer and Integration Hub. And of course, we'll continue fixing bugs in orchestration as needed. Any questions around any of this?
This is Spencer. So on the licensing, we have professional. Is it possible to just purchase a particular spoke from enterprise? So I need a Salesforce integration, or is it all or nothing?
It is all or nothing, unfortunately.
Okay.
However, there is a tremendous, if you look at what you get, there's a tremendous amount of value in the enterprise as well, including that introspection feature that we talked so much about. Jira uses it as a component that's embedded, but it's such a powerful feature, and we really recommend getting that. It is part of enterprise, but a really, really compelling reason to do that upgrade, along with all of this, the vast number of spokes that you get, and you end up with 6 million transactions to go along with it. And just for some context for that, we've measured all of the instances on our data center, and over 90% of them were consuming more than 1 million transactions. So you've got a lot of room to grow within that package.
One point of clarification too that I see questions about at times are sort of how the features and the spokes, the difference between those as you go through the tiers. And so all spokes, like Michael mentioned, can use or do use all the capabilities you see down the left. If you have, say, Google Hangouts, and Google Hangouts needs to use introspection, doesn't require you as a customer to have enterprise to use Google Hangouts. It's if you want to go and start building new capabilities, net new spokes, internal connectors for your own systems, that's really where that feature column then becomes important to you. So if you're focused on only using spokes, look at the spokes column. If you're potentially focused on building your own components as well, that's where you'd want to consider the features column as it relates to the packages as well.
Right. Any other questions around orchestration to Integration Hub migration?
Just out of curiosity, Michael and Josh, what are some of the most popular spokes that you guys get questions asked around, like maybe during knowledge, et cetera?
There's a large list of spokes we get asked about. We do very commonly get asked about some of the common Microsoft productivity products, as you might expect. Jira and Active Directory are 2 of our most used spokes today. A lot of customers will use Active Directory to do onboarding, to manage sort of ongoing import of data, as well as provisioning and updating and resetting users' passwords in their Active Directory environments. So in terms of I think at this point, AD and Jira are two of the most commonly used just because of how prevalent they are.
Gotcha.
And I field a lot of questions around password reset, which is also part of enterprise.
Right. Also up near the top, you'll see any spoke related to identity management. So things like Okta tend to have a lot of interest. And then from there, it really just depends on your business and what are the capabilities that are specific to your business and the processes that you need to manage. And so if you're in a development organization, you start to focus on things like, the commoditized IT, things like DevOps and Azure boards and GitHub, et cetera, and just varies from there.
Perfect. Daniel, I see you have another question.
Yeah, one kind of around performance best practices. So I've been playing with Flow Designer for a couple months now, and I've started to find myself doing things with flows that I used to do with business rules. Like, for example, monitoring for a state change of a field on a record and then updating another field as a result. I used to do that in a business rule, but now it's so easy to do in Flow Designer. I've kind of found myself doing things there. Is that a bad idea? Is one far more efficient than another? Or are there any general performance best practices?
Yeah, so a couple things to consider there, and Michael did bring up there was a very brief flash of this performance slide, and maybe we can go back to that if you don't mind, Michael. We have done an extensive amount of benchmarking in Flow, and in a lot of cases, we're approaching the speed of script, and in some cases, we're even faster than a script counterpart because underneath, behind the scenes, the action steps and actions within Flow Designer can be backed by Java code. So we have the ability to actually optimize beyond what you could accomplish in a script. And so these are some high level outcomes. We're able to execute hundreds of flows per second. In a scaled environment, we were able to execute over 100,000 flows in 5 minutes. And so in a lot of cases, to your question, it's perfectly acceptable to say this is an alternative to business rules, it's an alternative to workflow, it's an alternative to script. The one thing I would say is turning off reporting is extremely important, especially if you plan to run a lot of these at high volume. So reporting is that executions view, that great debugging view that we were able to see after the flow ran. And that's really great when you're developing. But in a production environment at high volume, that's a lot of information getting dumped to the database. So if you are doing that in a production environment for those sort of smaller task type flows, absolutely feel free to do that. Turn off reporting.
Now, from my point of view, the speed of development is so great that it's a really compelling reason to go ahead and migrate as much as you can from scripts to Flow Designer and Integration Hub. And this was New York. These stats are from New York, and we've gone even farther in Orlando, and we'll go further still in Paris.
Yep. Yep, great questions.
Well, that's a good one too, because if I remember correctly, Daniel, you said that you're a avid evening or nighttime developer last time we chatted. So hope that was
And this has been a game changer for me personally. Anytime I have to touch an old orchestration workflow, I just immediately start rebuilding it in the Flow Designer.
That's awesome.
And hopefully, Daniel, you can confirm that what I was doing was an aberration as far as the speed and responsiveness of the instance.
Yeah, normally it's a lot better than that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you got going on there.
It's a Monday, and I should have spent a little more time making sure everything was up to speed for that. So my apologies for putting you guys through a slow demo. But hopefully it conveyed what it's all about.
And if anything else, you kind of help with some light troubleshooting too that you may come across as well. So that's always good. Well, definitely. We have about 7 minutes left. Are there any other questions for Josh and Michael around Integration Hub?
Are there any additional considerations for our mid servers?
So we do support mid servers for all of our Integration Hub protocols, as well as running script on the mid. As far as additional considerations, the primary considerations with mid still apply, such as there will be additional latency because of having to shift back and forth to the mid. And so if you were doing, say, high volume scenarios, you would want to consider that. What's interesting about Integration Hub and Flow Designer is the entire flow engine can actually run on the mid. And this is very different from workflow. Workflow did a lot of back and forth by the ECC queue, and so that would result in a lot of overhead, a lot of slowdown in terms of when you had to run things on the mid. And so the ability for the flow engine to entirely run on the mid means that when necessary, if a flow, say you have a flow and it makes a REST call to an internal system in your environment, and so that the flow goes over to the mid server to run, it can continue running over there until it needs to come back to the instance for some reason. And so we've done a lot of optimization there. No other major considerations, unless you had specific questions there. We just
No, it's just as far as the specs. Do we need more memory, more CPU power, or is it pretty much on par with like I said, we run orchestration now? Would it pretty much just be on par with that?
Yeah, if you're running orchestration now, I wouldn't expect any major changes there. And yeah, we run within the standard footprint of the mid server.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Well, I definitely appreciate the time, Josh and Michael. As always, a great presentation, great overviews, great demonstrations. Thank you all customers for joining as well. As always, I'll provide a recording for this call for you guys to share with the rest of the audience that may not have been able to attend, and also to send you guys over the survey. Please fill that out. It's what helps us to ensure that we can continue with these office hours moving forward. If there's other topics that you'd like to see, definitely put that in the feedback on that survey so I can start working with our internal product teams to try to put some more of these together. But thank you guys so much. If you have more questions for Michael or Josh, feel free to forward those to me, and I'll get them over to Josh and Mike and see if they can answer those as well. But thank you all so much. You guys have a great rest of your Monday.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. Thanks for listening to us. And before we all drop, just want to throw out a plug. We did a bunch of knowledge presentations around Flow Designer and Integration Hub. So do check out the on-demand library on the community and look for Flow Designer, look for Integration Hub. You'll find some great materials out there for doing some of what you've seen today. We walk you through that. So really appreciate the time.
Yeah. We even have some demos that show you going from Teams to Flow Designer to Integration Hub all the way to Coupa, putting it all together. So it's pretty compelling stuff.
You said the magic word, everyone, Teams. I know some of you are very hot to trot around the Microsoft Teams too, so that's good stuff. Well, thank you all so much. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.